Welcome back to Beyond the Quo, where we break boundaries, redefine success, and inspire leaders to live boldly and authentically. I'm your host, Stacey Luces, and today we're going to be diving into a conversation that is really, really going to challenge the way that we think not only about relationships and confidence, but the way that not only we move through the world, but for those of us that either have kids, interact with kids, specifically young adults, whether we're working with them or whatnot, how to kind of do that in a way that is more meeting them where they are and not what we're used to. Joining me today is Erin Tarr. Hey, Erin.
Hello, hello.
Yay.
Happy whatever today is.
I know, right? Today is for us Tuesday. All right. So Erin is a best-selling author, a confidence coach, and a speaker whose work has impacted thousands, from corporate teams to young adults navigating life's biggest transitions. Erin is the creator of the Fiercest Framework. I just love that. And a 40 under 40 honoree, recognized for her groundbreaking work in empowering the next generation. She's been on countless stages, from FedEx Ground and FemCity Global to academic institutions and leadership forums. But today she's with us, and we're going to go beyond kind of those traditional definitions of confidence and dive into something that Erin has been sharing that is truly, truly, to me, as a person with teenagers, a bit of a game changer. The social sweet shop. This framework is going to break down 5 types of relationships that we all have, and hopefully help those of us wanting to redefine how we engage with not only young adults, but just maybe each other with intention, clarity, and confidence. Erin, I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat today. This was exciting.
Me too. All right. So before we get into kind of what I just mentioned, that social sweet shop, I want to start with your journey. So, I've known you for a couple of years now, and I love watching you on social media, not only with your daughters, but also the way that you always have this positive attitude and always have a smile. And knowing kind of a little bit more about you, what we present sometimes on the REELS and what's happening behind the REAL life, totally different, not only as mamas and entrepreneurs and all of those things, but with our teenagers, I feel like there's also that pressure to present the real, highlight real, and less so really dig into and connect over the real. I want to talk about kind of this combination of, and I have teenagers, like I mentioned, and I want to talk about young adults. There's this delicate place that I'm in, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners are in, where we're parenting, but they're adults, they're young adults. And so they have a lot more autonomy and independence. And so there's some like grief associated with losing, that childhood innocence and so forth. And there's also a lot of challenge with how do I navigate these young little rebels and game changers and not feel guilty about we're not at the place where we can be friends, but I have to be a friendly. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is the coaching phase, right?
Yeah.
We are standing on the side. We're not playing their game for them. They're playing the game. They're in their game of life, which is not our game of life, but we're the coach. So we've helped them set up some plays. We get to kind of, say some things from the sideline, but ultimately they're the one in the game.
Yeah.
And we hope that they have a friendly relationship with their coach, but also, sometimes they're going to be out there not exactly doing what the coach said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
not running the plays.
Deal with the consequences of what that looks like at different times. And as the coach, that's hard because you're like, no, I taught you how to do this the right way, and now you're not doing it. But it's their game to play. So
how do we pivot without losing our minds is my question.
How do we pivot?
Yeah. How do we without changing and I like to think of it as core values.
Yeah.
I like to think that my kids know what our core values are. Kindness, all of those things. But how do we not become enforcers?
Ooh, excellent question. Because ultimately, I think the best way to pivot is to not pivot. It's to ease.
Yeah.
Everything is an easement that we are adjusting. And I think this literally happens daily. So I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old and then a 10-year-old.
Okay.
So it is this ease into what stage are they at that I have some control over, knowing that ultimately, even with my 10-year-old, the amount of control I have is very, very, very little. Yeah. She has her own mind, her own thoughts, her own body. And ultimately, she gets to decide. Now, as a parent, it's much easier for me to set parameters around her that will help keep her safe and help her to make good decisions. And I still can't make her do anything. And even less so with the 14-year-old and even less so with the 17-year-old.
I love that.
So you're absolutely right. Core values are something that we should talk about, that we should think about, that we should ask our kids about. What do you think if it came down to these two decisions of how I was going to conduct, this question that we have in our life, this decision that we're making? What do you think would be the core values that our family holds that would inform those decisions most?
Yeah.
And what they say back to you would be very telling, because we think we know what our core values are. And we think they know what our core values are. But when we start talking about tricky situations, like, when a teacher does something that's unjust in school, how should we respond?
Sure.
When a friend is making a decision that we don't think is good, how should we respond?
Sure.
And when we can talk to them about that through the lens of our core values, but also ask them how they think about it through the lens of their core values, there can just be some really great discussions that help them to make those decisions for themselves when we know we can't be there to make those decisions for them.
Yeah. And to tie this back to so 3 things I talk a lot about on this podcast are redefining success, outside of the traditional way that we have, living authentically, which is so hard for many of us in our 40s and 50s because we grew up in a time when maybe there was just a lot more expectation and judgment on our decisions and sort of a lot more control over what we decided. And then also leading courageously. And yes, leading organizations or in entrepreneurship, our companies and all that stuff, but leading ourselves first, kind of what we were talking about, core values, and then leading our family, right? And navigating sort of this journey of this relationship that may have been a lot more straightforward when they were younger. But now the rules are shifting and they're coming into that a lot more autonomy. What do you say to kind of the midlifers that are struggling with being uber successful, being at the top of their game in their career? And I coach so many leaders, and this is the thing that stumps them the most, is this almost sense of nostalgia and regret around not having the relationship that they wished they kind of knew they could have had, but they were so busy building that career or that legacy that was one of the things that was sacrificed, is relationships overall, but specifically with their kids or their siblings even. But what do you say to people that still have that window?
Number one, it's never too late, whether they are 10, 16, 26. Yeah. It is never too late. 36. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is never too late to, with humility and curiosity, ask your child, what's your experience of our relationship?
Yeah.
Because it has to be with humility, because you have to be willing to hear it, because sometimes it's going to be hard, especially for those of us that we are success oriented. And you know what? It's easy to be success oriented for a certain type of personality, my personality included, because at work, you get the accolades and you get the bottom line and you get the coworkers telling you you're great. At home, they're still going to complain that you didn't get the right brand of apple juice. Or they're still going to complain that you picked them up 5 minutes from soccer practice. Or you don't get credit at home in the same way for the good things that you do. You just get a laundry list of things you continue to do. So I want to affirm why we did that for our personalities and for our own safety and protection, talking about reparenting ourselves. Like, there was a part of us that needed that confirmation that we were doing well, that we were doing the right things, that we were providing for our family. And we did that for our own safety. And in retrospect, maybe some relationships did not turn out the way that we wanted because of that. And forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
Have grace with ourselves.
Yeah. That's so hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Ugh, yeah.
And then go forth with curiosity. What is your experience of this relationship? I'm willing to hear it. I'm open to hearing it. If it gets too hard, I'll stop, I'll ask you to stop.
Yeah.
And then what would be some steps that you could envision that we could take to improve?
Yeah.
And problem solve together, because ultimately that's what relationships are, right?
Yes.
They are co-problem solving people. When whether it's your spouse or your children or your coworkers, like ultimately we're a team.
Yeah.
And we have an objective. So if the objective is to improve our relationship, no matter what stage it's at or what age it's at, let's do it together. Like the parent gets to be part of it, but they don't have to be all of it. They get to be part of it. And when we lead with curiosity and also give our kids that autonomy to say, like, you're also part of this relationship and I want your input and I want us to do this together, something much more beautiful is going to come out than if I'm like, taking my success-minded, oriented, check the box mindset and saying, I'm going to go fix this relationship. That's just not, and that's how we would approach it. That's how
we want to fix everything instead of
like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to take them on vacation and I'm going to give them this trust fund and I'm going to, and then it's going to be great.
Somebody said this quote. I don't know who said it, but they said, lean into the suck. Like, don't just always try to fix everything or run to the rescue. Like, really allow them. So my daughter is applying to colleges, and she, I would say she got 95% acceptances, 1 deferred and 1 no. And she like really fixated on that no, even though she didn't even want to go there. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, it's so high achiever. It's so right. And she's like, I wonder, could I have written? And she's like, and I'm like, child, you've got this litany of places that are vying for you and your talent and your right, all of the diverse skills and right, like. But I'm the same way. If I do a test and you get that one little one wrong, you're going to be like, oh no, why didn't I get 100 instead of celebrating the 95? I want to not shift gears, but dig in a little bit more. So, and again, I'm making this parallel between this opportunity that all of us have with young adults and interacting with them, helping shape them, mentoring them, whatever role you play with young adults. And the vulnerabilities and the areas that we're still working on with ourselves. Now, in my coaching, I do a 90-day intensive, and it's a third of that program is spent on confidence. And parts of it are understanding boundaries, redefining relationships, working on your core values, like really going through and building or rebuilding or redefining what gives you that impetus to fearlessly do the thing that you want to do. And to use your word, being fierce about it, right? Yeah. And if we're still, a lot of us are still struggling, working on evolving in our clarity and confidence with ourselves, especially if we're doing big, bold things that we worry about judgment. Yeah. Juxtaposition that with, young adults, female and male, that are, in bodies that are developing. My son grew, 6 inches in like a year and a half. Like his feet are now bigger. So it's like watching him, this tiny little person that I used to like hold in my hands, suddenly sprout, right? And it's very different for me interacting with the physical changes of him than my daughter, because I'm a girl. I kind of know what was going to happen, right? But just the voice, but there's the physical changes. There's the emotional maturity that isn't there yet to deal with rejection, to deal with maybe having a crush on someone, to deal with putting forth a paper or being challenged with SATs. How do we, in our own growing into our own confidence still, help them with theirs?
You hit the nail on the head, because when we are experiencing something at the same time that our teens are experiencing something, being able to share some of that with them gives them this feeling of not being alone and reminds us how hard they have it, and also reminds them a little bit that like our lives aren't all figured out either. And again, that is a beautiful way to build that relationship. I love, especially when my kids were younger, but even now, they love hearing stories about, as long as they're short stories, it can't go on too long, about
90 seconds.
Something similar to the difficulty that they're having and how I handled it. And they love it when I handled it poorly. That's their favorite. When I tell them, when I was in your age or somewhere around your age, or even when I was in college and they're in high school, but it's a similar type of obstacle that they need to overcome. When I handled it poorly and I can say, wow, in retrospect, based on my values now and what I know now, I totally would have handled that differently. And this is how it turned out, which was not great. They love hearing those stories. And it reminds me as I'm telling those stories, because that's not something we do for ourselves. Our kids help us to do this for ourselves, to remember, wow, I have grown a lot. I do have different coping mechanisms and tools for handling things now. I'm not there yet. I have not arrived. But look, we build confidence by building confidence. Right? So seeing
oh my God, repeat that. I'm building in my head a list of phrases that I want to have t-shirts for, and I love what you just said.
We build confidence by building confidence. You have to take action and do the thing in order to be confident about the thing. And sometimes when we're at that cusp of not feeling like we can take that big leap or push forward on the project that is in our heart or what have you, when we take a moment, and God bless our children for giving us these opportunities, to look back at all the times that we did take that leap, mostly because as young adults, we didn't have a choice. We didn't have any money, or we didn't have a job, or our parents were making us, or you know what I mean? Like we had to push forward and become more confident. And then I think, especially the type of client that you're working with, we've already accomplished so much that we could just sit back. We could just rest on what we've done and not listen to our authentic self and not push for a redefined success. We could just be like, you know what, I'm just comfortable here and that's too hard. But if we look back and see all the times that great things came from pushing just a little bit, from getting out of our comfort zone, and when we tell our kids those stories to help them do it for themselves, we help ourselves do it as well.
And that's the whole essence of, Beyond the Quo is a derivative of Beyond the Status Quo. Because we all could, sit in pocket and be like, hey, I've arrived. I'm good. I've got a little 401k set up and I can chuck it in. But, us Gen Xers weren't built that way.
There is more to be done.
I know. So talk to me about kind of the framework that you've built and what led you to sort of be inspired to not only create that, but bring it to fruition in the world and now coach and kind of lead in that space.
So the Social Sweet Shop literally grew out of discussions that I was having with clients. This was actually during COVID that this kind of came to be. And they're working with teens and tweens, like you talk about, growing so rapidly and bodies changing and things happening. And, there's this big push for like, how do we deal with bullies, and people are bullying and And when kids would come to me and tell me about their bully stories, part of me would say, well, that's actually bullying, because they're not targeting you specifically and trying to make your life miserable. They are just miserable. And sometimes that spills out onto you. And so we started to think about this, and I wanted to help them to identify the difference between a bully and just someone who you don't get along with, or someone who just is mean in general sometimes, or someone who just doesn't have social skills, and that negatively impacts you. And so as I started to think about this, The first one that we really hit on, and this specifically kind of comes from the mean girl metaphor, is our sardine brownie frenemies. We've all heard the term frenemies. In psychological smart people language, they are called ambivalent relationships. And we call them sardine brownies because if you go and you have a brownie, if you take a bite, you take a big old bite, you're hoping you get all brownie. But if there's some sardine cut up in there,
that's
there's going to be some icky parts, but you're not quite sure where those icky parts come.
Right.
And so that's where
Hold on, let me just swallow my bile. Just thinking about how that would...
It's disgusting. But this is where the whole metaphor started.
Yeah.
You have, and everyone, when you start to describe this, everyone can describe a friend where you really enjoy being around this person sometimes. You really feel great around this person sometimes. They treat you really well sometimes. You just don't know what to expect. And science says these are the most stressful types of relationships.
Wow. I'm having such a freaking epiphany right now with this. Because we also, as grown-ups, even in work relationships, even with employees, even with supervisors, leaders, we've got grown-up sardine brownies.
We do.
Oh, my God.
Which are totally different than just our sardines. Which are our enemies who want bad things for us. Because we know exactly how to deal with them. We know how to set boundaries with them. We know how to shut them out. We know how to alert an adult if there's a negative, like whatever. Like there's all sorts of ways that we deal with those people who are consistently
It's pretty
awful.
clear cut. Sure.
These people who sometimes, especially for teenage girls, have been their best friends since kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that they're a sardine brownie. They're assuming they're something else.
Yeah.
So then we developed these other 3 layers above the sardine brownie. The first is our jelly bean layer. And all of these have a sweet shop metaphor because jelly beans are just our friendly acquaintances. So if you want to have some jelly beans, you just go to the store, you buy a big bag, you've got hundreds, right? It's not a big deal. No effort taken. You go, to school and you smile at somebody and you loan them a pencil. There you go. You got a jelly bean. It's great. They're all over the place, which is wonderful because that's how you develop the next 2 stages of friendship, which is our Rice Krispie friends. So if you think again about making a Rice Krispie, it takes a little bit more effort. You need to have the cereal and the butter and the
right consistency. Yeah.
So you got some ingredients. It takes a little bit of time to make, a Rice Krispie, but not too much time. These are the people that you spend consistent time with because you're involved in the same activity. So for teenage girls, these are softball friends or church friends or neighborhood friends or your history class friends, right? Like you see them on a regular basis, you talk to them in that parameter, and you have things that you do together. So for adults, I usually say you probably need to see these people at least once a month. So maybe these are people in your networking group.
Sure.
Maybe these are people that work at the same place you do, but maybe in a different department, those types of things. You do see them on a regular basis. You have a friendly rapport with them, but you have lots of different groups of these people. So like for teenagers, you're not going to invite your history friends to the football game with your band friends. History friends are over there, band friends are over here. You're not really mixing, but you have lots of, options for social interactions. And then when people talk about friends, when you're really saying like, well, for me, when a teenager comes to me and says, I have no friends, what they're talking about is this level, which is our double chocolate cake friends.
Ooh, yeah. With Nutella.
Yes. It takes a lot to make a double chocolate. You have to get all the ingredients. You have to mix them in just the right way. You have to bake them for the certain amount of time. You have to let them cool. You have to ice them. You decorate. Like it's a whole thing. So I tell people, you're not going to make a double chocolate cake friend overnight. Or in a week or in 2, or even in 2 months. Like I say, it is unlikely that you have double chocolate cake friends that you haven't known for at least a year. These are people that you show up for consistently and they show up for you consistently. These are the people that when something good happens, you call. When something bad happens, you call. Or if you're a teen, you text because they don't call each other. Whatever.
Yeah. They really don't.
One of the hardest lessons that we continue to learn either as teens or as adults is putting someone in that double chocolate cake space who belongs in the sardine brownie space.
Yeah.
And we learn that lesson. And one of the things that as adults we have to learn is identifying what makes someone worthy of that spot, and then also becoming someone worthy of that spot.
I was just going to say, a lot of times we have an idea of what a bestie should look like, or an ideal anything. And it's our fantasy, right? It is what we've culled from decades of novels and rom-coms, if it's a romantic sort of expectation, and Cinderella stories. And we've cobbled together in our mind what the ideal friend, partner, parent even, or child, if you've watched enough, where the kids are angelic and like singing choir music when you walk in the room and whatnot. Yes. But that's our reality, no one else's.
Right.
And I think that getting down to the ingredients, to use your metaphor for, because sweets are legit.
Yes.
Getting down to the ingredients of what makes your perfect fudge brownie Nutella cake is going to be different than what I want in my version of that cake. If I like it a little bit more sweet or tart, let's just expand the dessert options.
Expanding the metaphor, I love it.
But absolutely understanding what you're looking for, but also how are you showing up as a friend, as a confidant, as a partner. And if you're showing up at a 5, expecting 10 level energy, then you're the sardine in the freaking equation, right?
So true.
Right?
So true. And if you're holding back, if you are not communicating, because that's a big piece of it. If you're not communicating effectively with what are your boundaries, what is your expectation for what kind of shared values we might have, what is how dependable does this person need to be? There are all sorts of very clear, this is what makes a strong relationship based on many, many works of different people. But I mean, the Gottmans are probably my favorite. Sure. And then Brene Brown,
of course, vulnerability and all of that good stuff.
Exactly. Dig into that for yourself. So much of it is this reparenting of ourselves. What do I value for me? And then what would that look like in a healthy relationship? Because when did we do that? Nobody gave us a class on how to have healthy relationships. Like that didn't happen.
No, not at all.
So we're guiding kids through. And that's one of the things when you see our kids like in unhealthy friendships or relationships, and we can see it so clearly and they can't.
Yeah.
But we can see it because we've experienced those negative things. But even when we see it for them, it's still difficult to see for ourselves.
And one of the things I'm sure you see a lot of is this tendency, and I love these commercials. I want to say it was Dove, but I could be messing that up, where they were like, fight like a girl.
I feel like it might have been Dove. Yeah. I mean, they've done a lot of like a girl
so the
stuff,
fight like a girl when you're under 10, 11 was, powerful and fearless and throat punch. Not advocating for that. But as we got older, our fists got really limp, and like we almost made fun of it, and it became this like joke, right? Like to fight like a girl became honestly really tantamount to a light insult, right? And so watching that sort of play out in real time, and the people pleasing comes in, and even working with people now. I mean, you stack some of these leaders against, and they're formidable. And yet they still have imposter syndrome or a tendency to people please, still trying to like suss out and consume the sardine within the brownie, and really getting nauseous. And it manifests. I will tell you how I'm like I'm using your analogy for me, being in those environments where I was consuming sardine with brownie all the time led to burnout. And so there is a physical, emotional, spiritual productivity manifestation of trying to navigate toxic relationships where you are uncertain of where you stand and how that person is going to show up. And it really impacts mental wellness, but also physical wellness, because now your adrenal system's like, oh, are we in fight or flight? Are we right? I don't know what to expect. Your lymphatic system is jacked, right? Anxiety. So there is a true measurable impact of not working through both with yourself first, but in that family dynamic of equipping our unit to go forth into the world fiercely and smartly, but also cautiously.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. They have to have a safe home base that they know they can fall back to.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And that is really only established if we, as the adults, feel safe in our body and we have a regulated nervous system.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of kids spend so much time in the room. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that kids spend so much time in their room these days. But one of the reasons is if we are their sardine brownie, because one time when we come out of our room, mom's like, oh, it's so good to see you. And do you need something to eat? And da-da-da. And the next time we come out of our room, pick up your socks. Why haven't you unloaded the dishwasher? Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Are you living in my house? Is this what you're saying? I'm not going to sit here and act like that is totally not me. And a lot of times, full confession, I'm like thinking about it now, how I show up sometimes, and I've gotten, oh my God, remarkably better in the last couple of years. But how I show up is largely dependent on the day that I've had. And another mind-blowing thing, who I've interacted with.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I told my kids some days, especially now that I've taken a job and I'm interacting with a lot more people during the day before I get
And you're
to
getting
them.
sardine brownies all the time sometimes.
I'm like, I've run out of kindness by the time I pick you up.
Yeah. Ugh.
And so
I got
the job
goosebumps.
for me,
You're absolutely right. How many of us? Yep.
The job for me is to either one, figure out how to not expend my kindness on people that don't deserve it.
Sure.
Not to be mean to people. You know, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like,
be neutral.
how do I set my boundaries, protect my peace?
Yeah.
Or how to fill up my kindness again. What fills me up before I interact with them? Or making my communication clear to them, like, I'm out of kindness and I need some mercy from you.
Yeah.
Grace from you, because I know that I want to show up for you, and I know that what I have right now is not going to be sufficient for what you need.
Yeah.
So let me have some time or some space. And of course, my kids are, I mean, if you have toddlers, that's not really, you got to figure out something else. You got to form a team or something. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But for teenagers, they get it.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you need something, can you either write me an email or text me or a note? And as soon as I feel like I'm full up again, can do this, then we can approach this together. And girl, you are not alone, because literally last night, I had a little meltdown and then I went to bed at 8:00. Yeah. Because I was like, it's all gone.
I've started saying, I don't know if you've watched Lilo and Stitch, where Stitch would say, like, she'd say, what's your badness level?
Wouldn't it be awesome?
Yeah, if we could just say, you know, my gremlins.
That I use. Wouldn't it be awesome if we wore around a little badge that said, here's my badness level, or here's how much,
my gremlins are in charge right now. And so what either get out of the way or understand that I'm not fully in my full faculties right now. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then when we are self-reflective, engage that for ourselves, we're like, wow, I have had 3 days in a row where I haven't had anything left for my kids.
Yeah. Something has to shift.
Do I need to shift? Because if they are the most important people in my life, and I say that they are, then I'm going to need to do something.
Yeah.
And we always have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And the two choices we have at any given time may not be two great choices, but we always do have a choice. Mm-hmm. And then we can slowly adjust to get to a place where we can make better choices.
Better
that will
choices.
Continue to be better. That's why I love working with teens though, because their choices can lead them like in totally different trajectories really quickly.
Yeah.
Which can be beautiful and tricky.
Yes.
But they can pivot quickly. When we have a mortgage and a family and aging parents or whatever we have, our choices might just be tiny pivots because we're not able to like totally take a left-hand turn right away.
Without falling off the cliff.
Exactly. But we still have a choice, and like owning that agency to be able to say, I can choose something different.
Yeah.
And move forward.
How can, and I like to bring things back to kind of real world situations, right? Like there's a lot of chaos happening in real life, right? And while I think adults are, however you are cued in and grappling with your emotions and feelings and consequences of things happening, whether I know I have a lot of friends who are federal employees and a lot of them are experiencing real life, like, hey, you're fired today. And trying to not only grapple with their sense of identity being stripped away so quickly, but maybe trying to put on a front when our kids are exposed to everything real time, right? Like even more so than us. How can we strip away those pretenses, if you will, that everything is okay? Because they see right through that. How can we step into spaces where we feel really raw and vulnerable and not sure how to resurrect from that right now, with the understanding that we can give these young adults so much more credit than maybe we typically have been to maybe lead us a little bit during this period. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, again, leading our conversations with them with curiosity.
Yeah.
To be able to say, so what are you hearing on social media, in your classes, or just out in the ether? Like, what are you hearing and how is it making you feel? So starting with that curiosity for them to gauge where they're at, because all of our kids are going to be at different sensitivity levels, right?
Sure.
So some are able to take it all in and just be very factual about it and move along and what have you. Others are going to not be able to sleep at night because it's just,
and quite honestly, they may be worrying about their parents and their future, but not knowing how to express that because they're thinking maybe I'm piling on.
Right. So being able to ask them where they're at.
Yeah.
And I love a tool that I love to use, like you kind of said with the badness scales, on a scale of 1 to 10. A scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about your future?
Yeah.
10 being like, I'm terrified that the whole planet is about to, burn up and fall apart. And World War III starting.
Sure.
Or 1 being like, I didn't even know there's anything going on, So getting a gauge of where they're at and then telling them where your gauge is. And being affirming of our feelings. Like my feelings on this are, and my feelings are valid. And I'm working to balance that with hope.
Yeah.
I'm working to balance that with advocacy. I'm working to balance that because we only lose hope when we stop acting. Or
we feel trapped and alone, isolated in that emotion. Because now I think there's this general of, I don't want to talk about it. I don't know who I'm offending or upsetting. And I think that in the home unit, we've got to ensure, and when I say home unit, not just your children and yourself, but just your people, right? Your double fudge brownie, your team. How do we have spaces where even in disagreement, we can safely navigate and validate each other that still safe, still love you, here's what's happening. And honestly, maybe sometimes ask for space to process or whatever if you need it.
Yes. And I think that is the key. But I don't think a lot of people know what a regulated nervous system feels like.
Yeah.
So they don't know when they're out of it because they've been out of it for so long, because that's when you know to ask for some space to process. That's when you know to not dig into the disagreement because you're already at a 10 of intensity, you know. So it is about self-knowledge. It always comes back to the self-knowledge, right? What can I handle and also try to maintain my own peace? How do I balance being an informed individual, being a caring, empathetic individual in this reality, with also being able to claim my own peace? And always being open to those conversations with our kids, I think, is where they learn to do the same thing, to find that give and take, that balance. We have to trust our kids that they can handle hard stuff. As long as we are that safe space to reassure them that whatever we can do to help them, and we have surrounded them and ourselves, God willing, with community that are also going to do everything they can do to keep people safe.
Yeah.
To make wise decisions, to continue to uphold the values that our family stands for and that the people that we've surrounded ourselves stand for. They're hard conversations, and anyone that is willing to do them, I just so admire and applaud.
Yeah.
And our next generation is going to be so much better off if we do step into that space, if we do lead with curiosity, lead with humility, and attempt to maintain a regulated nervous system in the process.
And one of the things I always remind myself personally is, you know, I came from a very different background. And so my worldview is very different, coming from a developing country, as an immigrant, all of these things. And I always, I'm super grateful and fully aware that I have privileges now that I didn't have. And I'm hyper conscious of single moms or broken homes, or where there's domestic violence, or there are homes where the unit and the team is barely hanging on and just really surviving. Not even, I mean, that's like maybe a generous word sometimes. What are some things that, because we've tossed around a whole bunch of stuff like regulating your nervous system and, you know, all of these things, but what are maybe 3 things that are super simple, that you'd recommend for people just like, oh, well, Erin and Stacey, it's all well and good to like be like, have a community and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
What are like 3 things that you could share that would help?
I'm putting myself in the mindset of someone who is just hanging on.
Yeah.
Like, this is all I've got. And this
is why I love you. I feel like we're both getting emotional without even like.
I mean, it is. It's so. I mean, everything. I am on the verge of tears 24/7 these days. if not for, you know.
I just thought it was me, but okay, it's probably the weather. Yeah.
It is real. It is real.
Yeah.
And I recognize how much privilege I have even in that space.
Sure.
But the choice that keeps bringing us back to hope when we're barely holding on is gratitude. And I don't mean that to in any way be toxically positive.
Yeah.
It is not in any way to push out the hard stuff. We need to recognize and give ourselves grace for all of the hard, like, yes, the grocery bill was too high, and no, we don't have enough time, and no, not anyone got enough sleep, and here are all the things. Those are all real, and nothing should negate those realities. And the only choice sometimes when all of that is so hard is my choice to say, okay, but how can I fill myself with some bit of gratitude in the midst of this to give myself an opportunity to keep going?
Yeah.
Because if we only let that hard stuff pull in on us and we don't push back with a little bit of gratitude, it will destroy us. But this is based on science. I mean, you know what I mean? This isn't me trying to be woo. This is based on science, the science of gratitude. And I think sometimes it's the smallest things, right? It's like I was able to brush my teeth this morning and my mouth feels clean, and thank God, because nothing else is going right now. Literally nothing else. But man, I'm so glad I was able to brush my teeth this morning.
And I think, we've forgotten that, and I say this broadly, I'll speak for myself. Sure. Yeah. I think that there are resources available that are free. And so I think going back to the basics, right? Libraries, where you can perhaps find community. I know I
love our library.
I still go to the library.
Favorite place.
My books are always overdue because I packet them up and come home and they sit on my shelf like, hey girl, hey, are you? But ask your teen, or maybe you offer that at least once a month. You will find a way, if you don't have transportation, but find a way to get to the local library, and they have a list of topics that are interesting to them, or travel, whatever it is, and grab some books. 1, 2, I think as much as social media can be toxic and negative, it can also be the inverse of that. And so I think sit with them and maybe curate a feed that is refreshing. Maybe you help them follow people that inspire them and look like them. If you are in a place where everybody looks and feels and is leaning a different way from you.
Different.
I think another thing is there are so many committed humans leading foundations, and I try to feature them all the time, where their sole purpose in life is to support certain parts of the population, whether that's folks that are neurodivergent or whatever, right? Recovering from abuse and I think if you can't go there physically, maybe, it's just not feasible, do a search and figure out if they have virtual options, right? And it's just a link. You click a link. And if you are like, Stacey, I don't have internet, like you could still go to the library and do that, right? Like you could reserve a computer. And so I think I like to say, both in my life and in coaching, sometimes it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And so I want to challenge everyone listening who are like, oh, it's easy for so-and-so to do, or I don't have that access. The beautiful thing is you kind of do.
Well, a great question you can ask yourself is,
right?
How might I? If I automatically go to the I can't,
I love that,
or it's impossible, going to the how might I? If in some universe I could, what might that look like? And when we just open our brains to that, our brains fill in. Our brains are freaking amazing. They will fill in answers, some of which might be crazy and impossible, but others which actually could work. And then you get onto those, right? How might I do this? How might we do this together?
And building on what you said, anybody that's poo-pooing a vision board or manifesting dreams, listen, it may not happen immediately, a year from now, 5 years from now, but definitely everything that I have intentionally written and prayed and meditated about, even if I look back on it a few years later, because maybe I lost the journal or whatever, I find it in a notes in an old phone or something.
Happens all the time, yes.
I guarantee you, and you can fight me on this, it's fine, at least 60 to 80% of it has been fulfilled.
I love doing that. I love finding those things and being like, oh, look at all the things that I thought I was going to do, and now I've done them.
And sometimes it's not even in any way, shape, or form that I could have fathomed.
Absolutely.
So I think we will leave you guys with that. Erin, this has been such a pleasure. Any last words? And please tell folks how to find you.
Yes, my Instagram handle is at Erin Tarr Speaks, ErinTarr speaks.
I love that.
And that's probably the best way to DM me or message me or what have you. And I just encourage people to hold on to hope and keep learning, keep growing, because that's where the beauty lies.
And come out of comfort zones, right? Like, I know our parents didn't talk to us about Jack, but but we can go there. Trust me. Erin, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. And I think every listener, whether they are a parent, a mentor, a teacher, a leader, or someone just trying to navigate friendships and relationships in adulthood, has something that they could have taken away from this conversation. And if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share, subscribe, like it. The more that we can share these sort of strategies, as simple as they are, even with our kids. I kept it PG today, you guys. I did not drop any kind of little bombs, but certainly tag us on social media. And you've already done the quo. It's time to go beyond. I'll catch you next week. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.